Good evening. Over the past few years, more and more emphasis has been put on Fiji's road infrastructure. Most people can agree that while newer, wider roads can make a serious impact on traffic, it will take a long time and a lot more investment in roads before we're able to catch up. Recently, the Fiji Roads Authority has been putting in place additional measures to counter traffic in urban areas. How much of an impact will these measures make? We discuss that and more tonight on the show with our guest, Mr. Jonathan Moore, the CEO of the Fiji Roads Authority. Good evening. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Evening.
So let's talk about all these alternative measures. When you go out and talk to members of the public, I'm guessing the common misconception is that the only way to solve traffic issues is just by making roads wider. So talk to us about some of the things that the FRA is also looking into.
Yes, it's a common thread when I speak to people that make more roads, build more bridges. That's not really the answer to the question. We need to make effective what's in place right now. There's not a solution just to add more roads until you sort out what's going wrong. So we have enough lane space, and I always use Suva as an example because it's the most densely populated part of the country. So if things work in Suva, then they'll work elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So right now we're bringing measures in to improve traffic flow, avoid congestion by improving the accessibility to lane space. And when I say lane space, I mean the number of lanes that people can travel on. So right now between Nakasi and Rewa, we're finishing off the Kings Road 4-lane section. That will add one more lane space in each direction. Now, a lane, in general transportation theory, a lane is capable of accommodating between 1,200 and 1,500 cars an hour. We are certain that the lane space availability in Suva is adequate for the traffic right now. It just needs to be used more wisely. So by adding the 2 lanes and doing some more work on Printers Road on a 3-lane scheme, which I'll talk about in a minute, we should be able to ease congestion to a great extent. But it's not the only solution to easing congestion. There's other things that need to go along with it. We fully advocate alternative means of transport. Bus lanes, peak hours, park and ride schemes, but they involve a lot of stakeholders to get together and pull this thing through. But I was out in Kings Road last week, and I sometimes go out there and park up and watch the traffic movements as they're coming into town. And I saw something I'd never seen in 40 years of working on roads. I watched the traffic coming into Suva at rush hour, and I counted 32 consecutive vehicles with a single occupant. Now, I've never seen that before anywhere in the world. I've seen maybe 3 or 4 cars with a single occupant, then you'll get 2 people, then another single, and it's random. But 32 consecutive cars with one person is unheard of. And that's a problem we're having right now. And we need to address that. If we can address the single person in the car situation by providing decent public transport, then that will solve so many issues.
Right. And in fact, that's just one of the aspects that we'd like to look at on the show tonight. Because as you mentioned, that is an issue that even you spoke about the last time you were on For the Record. But so let's get to our agenda. Let's firstly discuss the intelligence transportation system, the intelligent transportation system. Right?
So you had said that this is going to be something that you're willing to look into and work with the LTA with, but the intelligence transportation system, for those that are not familiar with an initiative of this sort, just talk to us about what its main features are. Intelligent
transportation is it's a really glamorous and fancy term for just monitoring the roads properly. And it's something that we are going to be doing, and we are doing it in conjunction with LTA. It's what it does is it records and stores data and allows you to analyse traffic movements. And if you get the right system in place, you can actually do real-time adjustments to signals on traffic junctions, and you can call the police out to assist in routing traffic where you need to in real time, because it links back to a central control room. So what we'd look to do is, in conjunction with the police and LTA, and we're having discussions now about this, is we'd formulate a team that would operate from a central control station somewhere in the country. This is not just for Suva, this is for the whole country. So you can do it remotely and through Wi-Fi, and you can control the entire country's transportation network from a single control centre. And you put sensors and monitors all over the road, you put cameras all over the road, and it picks up the information you need to relay back to the control centre. It's used all over the world and it's very successful. For example, there's a lot of issues right now about overloading the vehicles. Currently, we have to witness vehicles that seem to be overloaded and direct them into a weighbridge to weigh them. With, excuse me, with ITS, you can do it remotely. So right now, we're replacing 17 bridges around Fiji. And what we can do on the approach roads to bridges is to build in the sensors that are required to measure the load as the vehicle goes over the sensor approaching the bridge. There's going to be a camera adjacent to the bridge that photographs and records the load of the axle of the vehicle, the registration number of the vehicle as well, and it can relay it back to the central control centre. And if it's overloaded, then a fine can be issued. If it's seriously overloaded, the police can be alerted and they can intercept the vehicle on the route.
So I'm guessing many stakeholders will be involved in the intelligent transportation system?
Yeah, we'll do the installation of all the necessary equipment, like the cameras, the sensor pads, and do all the cabling work as well, and the transmission systems. But the actual enforcement and monitoring will be between LTA and the police.
So for an initiative like this, of course, not everyone's going to be on board straight away. You might need to do a trial basis first to see if it's feasible, especially with Fiji's ever-changing weather patterns, and the road infrastructure also takes a hit with that. Are you planning on doing this anytime soon, or are you thinking about this as a long-term strategy?
Well, then, to have a properly operating ITS system throughout Fiji, you're looking at probably 3 or 4 years. And you'll be bringing it in stages, as you say. You'd focus on certain elements of the system. Maybe you want to get the weigh in motion system going first, all over the country, and then you can bring in the linking all the traffic signals as a secondary issue. I think what we'd end up doing is the weigh in motion system is the easiest one to get started because that's a defined location in bridges that are being built now. Luckily, those bridges cover the entire network of the major highways in Fiji, so that wouldn't be an issue to put those in now and link them back to the central control station. The monitoring and control of traffic signals is a bit more complicated, and that will take a bit more time. We need to get the system that allows us to adapt the signal frequency and timing first, and then link that into the control system as well. So that's a more complicated issue. I'd say that we would probably get this up and running within the next 2 to 3 years.
So you had mentioned earlier on that some of the reasons that people tend to have all these traffic issues is because they don't follow basic road rules. But then again, you have to also consider infrastructure. Sometimes you notice that in certain areas, not all over the road network, you have issues like potholes or uneven roads. You also have traffic signals that are not working or are not functional most of the time. And that tends to lead to a bit of a cowboys and Indians situation on the road where anyone just goes however it is that they want. How do you plan to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. We're not trying to say that we're not involved in congestion. We are. I mean, we have to hold our hands up for that. If we can't maintain traffic signals to be operational properly, then we're at fault. So what we're doing now is, rather than there was a plan some years ago to expand the networks and to do great works and do all new roads. We don't need to do that, and we shouldn't do that. What we need to do right now is get what's here working properly first. So rather than install 50 new sets of traffic signals in one go, we get what's operating now operating properly. And that's the plan over the next 12 to 18 months. We've had a large shipment of equipment brought into the country. It's the latest technology. And we're gradually changing out all the old defunct systems with these new ones. And we're doing the same with streetlights. We're stopping, well, we're not stopping, we're actually postponing for a year or two the great increase in street lighting around the country, because we need to get what is here now operating. In the urban areas in particular, there are some very, very dated and inoperable systems. I get complaints weekly for the same street light. It's not working properly, and I'm not going to repair them anymore. I'm going to change them out and put new ones in. So we're going to focus on getting what's wrong put right first, and then we'll expand. That doesn't mean we're not going to go into some of the areas with new street lights, so particularly in the rural areas. We have to do that. And we have to increase our solar street lighting efforts as well.
More on the FRA's ongoing and upcoming projects right after this. Welcome back. Mr. Moore, let's talk about one-way streets. Let's talk about Nandi, in fact. Recently, after the change that happened in Nandi, the Nandi Chamber of Commerce and Industries raised some issues with the one-way traffic route through Nandi's main business centre, and they claim to have seen a downturn in trading. So we'd like to investigate a bit about this. Is this usually the case where you have you implement such measures and traders start getting affected?
I can't say specifically. I don't know the reason why there's a downturn in trade. I mean, it seems that the one-way system in Nandi is operating from a transportation point of view quite efficiently. Mm-hmm. Once we install the traffic signals there and get the enforcement going, it'll be very efficient. The downside appears to be for some of the traders that they're losing business. Now, I don't know if that's due to the one-way system or it's due to the global decline in the economy or the consolidated budget we're in under this year. Nationally, things seem to be a bit tighter. There's no denying that from anybody. And I don't know if it's because other places are opening up other venues. And Martintar, Denero, and Namaka, they're all expanding. So I don't know the reason. It could be. In fact, I suspect it's probably a combination of all those reasons.
Mm-hmm. So there's no evidence to suggest that the change in the road has directly caused the downturn in business.
We have no empirical evidence. We have anecdotal discussion, and Nandi Chamber of Commerce have told us they do have some evidence, and they said they're going to send it through to us, and we're happy to go through it. Mm-hmm. But let's be clear on this. The reason why Nandi town centre was converted to a one-way system was because early last year we were inundated with complaints.
Right.
It's 30 minutes, 40 minutes to cross through Nandi town centre. And people have to realise that Nandi town centre main street is not just a main street for Nandi town centre. There are countless villages on the other side of Nandi town centre from Queen's Road. There's Denero, there's Wailoa. There are so many areas. So many people travel through Nandi town centre to get to another location. Maybe not for shopping, maybe to visit people or go to another venue. So we have to consider free movement through the town. Now, traditionally, when you do a one-way system and get traffic moving more smoothly and increase parking, because this one-way system's increased parking in Nandi by 76 spaces. So normally that would improve the commercial side of things. So I don't know the reason for this decline. Mm-hmm. Well, I do know one thing that's missing in Nandi, and that is parking. Mm-hmm. Even though we've added 76 parking spaces, it's nowhere near enough. Mm.
But even from personal experience, traveling through Nandi even a few months ago, it's not a pleasurable experience. Mm. And if I can, put my personal view here, absolute mess, an absolute mess driving through Nandi.
Well, from my point of view, I must say I've spent pretty much my entire life in Suva, and one thing that has not changed, even though you've implemented one-way traffic systems within Suva CBD, there still seems to be traffic congestion because drivers are, for lack of a better term, unwilling to adhere to road rules and restrictions. We've seen right outside FBC house along Carnarvon Street that has been converted to a one-way street. And you still have vehicles that are continuing to disregard that. With signs and everything in place, what more does the FRA need to do to actually get people to understand that this is not on?
I'm not sure what the FRA can do more than we've done now. I mean, taking the example of Suva, the recent Suva one-way system, we put it in the press, we drew maps, we announced it in television, and in the newspapers and radio. We put signs up, we've put white paint on the road with big arrows showing you which way to go. If people can't follow those simple directions, maybe they shouldn't be driving.
Well, what about
suffice to say, it was well publicized. Yeah.
Speaking of being well publicized, FBC radio stations had been continuing to push out the FRA's message that there would be clearway traffic restrictions that would be imposed as of this month. Yeah. And for the first 2 to 3 days, we could see that people were adhering to the rules. They were not stopping, they were not unloading or unloading, none of that happening. We even had different stakeholders actually monitoring the situation. But after a few days, as is usual in Fiji, everything just sort of fell apart, and you still see people stopping and picking passengers on and dropping them off, and people just going anyhow, haywire within these areas.
Yeah, I think the clearway system has been shown to be a good solution. As you say, from day one, I was told that LTA would find so many people in the first few days for stopping. But I think what happens is that people chance it. They'll look around to see if there's anybody with an LTA uniform there, and if they see somebody, they'll move down the road 100 yards and do that. It's the nature of people to try and avoid following rules.
Well, funny you should mention that, because we actually have pictures of those who are supposed to make sure that people listen to what the FRA has said. We've seen a couple of your own stakeholders actually disregarding this, continuing to do as they please. Maybe it's a situation where they're trying to say they're monitoring it, but they're breaking the road rules.
Give me the photographs. I'll deal with it. if it's my own guys breaking the rules, they will be brought to task on that, because we've got to set the example.
But look, so generally, what do you think it takes to bring about a change in attitude for this sort of thing?
See, I don't know. I mean, I was talking to a group this morning, and I believe, from my past experience, I've never come across such a phenomenal resistance to change that I've come across in Fiji. It's outstandingly difficult to make people understand that change is good. You improve things by changing things. I would even go back to your Nandi issue. I even would say that is a definite improvement in transportation. Now, I cannot accommodate everybody's situation when I'm trying to make the best solution for everybody. There'll always be somebody who's affected. The one-way system, it bemuses me as to why people can't follow the simplest directions. How can you not follow a big white painted arrow on the road? It's there in front of you, and I say, if they can't follow that, they shouldn't be driving. Now, the problem with this is also, in the very near future, we're about to expand the one-way systems in Suva and in other parts of the country. And if they're failing on simple roads, like around FBC building, then when we do McGregor Street through round to Nolly Street, that's going to be absolute chaos for them.
Right.
And that's part of the Sarup 2?
No, it's not. No, Sarup 2 is road rehabilitation, where we're rebuilding roads. The reason we're doing the McGregor one-way system, we call it that, it's actually more than McGregor. It'll be McGregor down to Gordon Street, up to Pratt Street and Shelburne Avenue and Nolly Street, and that loop to where the Bow roundabout is. We're doing that because there's a massive development going on in Fiji, in Suva right now, sorry. Along the McGregor, Bow Street, Rewa Street area, it's been rezoned for commercial, and there are some significantly large buildings being built there. And I've had a team of my transportation engineers in the office have been looking through a solution, and we're finding it very difficult, not just to move the general public around Suva on these roads, but actually get sensible access to these buildings. When you stick a 28-storey building and then over the road another 10-storey and then further down the road 17-storey buildings, you have to consider access to the buildings, and it's not being considered at all. So we're trying to work with that and play catch-up and try and solve future problems that will happen as this area gets more developed. And the only solution we can think of right now is to do that one-way loop.
We'll have more for you right after the break. Mr. Moore, before the break, there was a bit of talk about Sarup 2. For someone who's not aware, it's the Suva Arterial Road Upgrade Program, Phase 2 of it. For someone who isn't aware, talk to us about what this is, what this program is about.
So Sarup 2 follows on naturally from Sarup 1, which dealt with Edinburgh Drive and Ratumara and roads like that. What it is, it's a scheme to completely reconstruct roads, complete roads. We're not just doing patch repairs, we're actually total reconstruction. It includes all utilities, footpaths, street lighting, signs, the road itself, all constructed to a 25-year life standard. And it's happening across 15 roads through Suva. We've got roads like Amy Street, Ratasakuna, Brown Street, Waimanu, all the major arterial roads and some of the smaller roads at the side that are in a very poor condition. We're beyond the point of repair now on some of these roads. As you probably see as you drive around, the minute the rain comes, the potholes get washed out again and again and again. We can't repair them anymore, so we have to rebuild the roads. And that's part of the Sarup 2 project.
Now, interesting that you brought up those old roads and how they're beyond the point of repair. You've also mentioned earlier on that there's going to be vehicle dimension restrictions, especially with all these heavy trucks that are going along these old road networks, deteriorating it even more.
Yeah, the reason for that, I mean, let's be honest, using any one of the urban centres in Fiji, they're all the same. They were designed many, many decades ago, and they never envisaged the size and weight of vehicles that are being used on the roads now. It's the same all over the world, where in urban centres, unless you want to demolish the entire urban centre and restart it and start again, you have to do something about controlling vehicle length. What we can't have is vehicles trying to navigate and negotiate into plots off two-lane roads by doing multiple manoeuvres to back into a driveway. That causes congestion, and invariably they end up going over the footpath, or they'll hit a sign and cause damage. So to preserve the roads from a damage point of view and from a congestion point of view, we'll be imposing dimensional restrictions, and those dimensional restrictions come with load restrictions as well. So vehicles on small roads, the basic theory is that if you have to do multiple manoeuvres to access a plot on a normal road with normal dimensions and radii, then you cannot be on that road. That's a simple solution. So what we'll do is we're going to put out a table of road widths compared to the vehicles that can use them, and then we'll assign that rationale to all the roads in the urban areas. It's not just Suva, again, it's everywhere. And also, we're also considering at the same time of restricting the time of access of these large vehicles to some of these roads. The amount of times I've seen large vehicles trying to navigate and negotiate bends and turns on narrow roads at school time or at rush hour, it causes so much disruption and delay. So we're looking to have heavy vehicle time bans on certain parts of the urban centres as well.
That's so true, because just along Princess Road you see quite a lot of these heavy vehicles, long vehicles, oversized vehicles that are just clogging up the main roads, and it's just, you know, a case of a worker that's going home and for some reason or the other taking company vehicles home with them, which are quite large, and it takes you about an hour and a half just to get from there to Tamavua. On that note, while you said about the height and the width and the length and all the dimensions of the vehicles, how is this particular vehicle dimension restriction going to be monitored, and who's going to be doing it?
Well, it'll be there'll be signs identifying the restriction, and it'll be enforced by LTA. The general rule in the arrangement in Fiji is that the infrastructure is maintained, constructed, managed from an infrastructure point of view by the FRA, but all enforcement of traffic on the roads is done by LTA.
So we spoke a bit earlier about deteriorating roads and the rate at which they deteriorate after being repaired or built. You also spoke about, even the last time that we were here, you spoke about the fact that Fiji just has aging infrastructure, and there was no foresight in the way that these urban areas were designed. But even in the communities, there is a lot of talk about shoddy engineering, or below par engineering. That if you, for example, a road that was constructed 10 years ago, the engineering is just different from what you find in other countries. So do you agree?
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. There are some shocking examples, and we're trying to fight that right now. I mean, some of the engineering that was used before, I have no idea where it came from. It's not appropriate to what we're trying to achieve in Fiji right now. We have to completely rethink what we're doing. There are many reasons why the roads are in a bad condition, and I've said in the past it's down mainly to underfunding and no maintenance program and overloading. Yeah, those are contributing factors. But if you don't get the road right in the first place when you build it, then you're exacerbating the problem.
So something like that, how far back or how long would it take for FRA to catch up and sort of remedy these problems?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. How far back, I can only say decades. I've seen situations, and I've seen reports, and I've seen records going back 30 years, and I wonder how these things were accepted. But then I look at things that were done 7 or 8 years ago, and I wonder what was going on. How long will it take to catch up? Well, we've done an assessment on what we need to do to Fiji's highway infrastructure to make it international standard and maintainable, and you're looking at probably $3 or $4 billion. Now, if you've got to spend $3 or $4 billion on getting it to a international standard of expectation here, then you have to relate it to budgetary allocations. If you divide the number you get divide the number of years by the number you get, and it'll tell you how much it's going to cost per year. Right? So if we're looking at $500 million a year, then $4 billion worth of work is 8 years. We're talking in the terms of 8 to 10 to 12 years to get this put right.
Right, and in fact, we spoke about funding earlier as well. Internally, in terms of regulation, when a contractor is given a specific area to construct, are there any internal regulations for, let's say, for example, quality control?
Oh yeah. And this is something that I've been struggling with since I came here. The lack of attention to detail and quality issues of going ignored is staggering. So our major focus now is quality, and it's not just quality of the installation on the road, it's quality of the materials we use. It starts way back. It's the quality of the material and the quality of design. That's the two things that start. We now have very high expectations on the design, and we're also putting in place some restrictions on the quality of materials as well. For example, river gravel. River gravel itself, as a pebble in a river, can be quite a hard piece of material, but it's very difficult to control the strength of it. You're not sure about how homogeneous it is with the rest of the river gravel. A stone could be originated 10 yards away from where you find it, and the one next to it could be 10 miles away because it's in a river. You've got no control in that respect. And when you crush it, you don't get the same level of control as you do from a quarry stone. Added to that, it just destroys the environment. So going forward, from 2020 onwards, all contracts are going to go out with a requirement for only quarry stone. We're banning the use of river gravel for many reasons. They've just alluded to most of them. And we want to standardise on the quarry stone from specific quarries, and I'll have my own people there monitoring the quality of the stone. So that takes care of the design, that takes care of the stone. Then we move on to the quality of the installation, and that is a whole show in itself. The things I see on the road now, even to this day, I just don't pay the contractor. They know that if we see bad quality work, they're not paid for that work. They have to go and do it properly. And I keep saying to people, what we're doing here is we're maintaining roads and highway structures. This is not rocket science, it's very simple. And to do something properly may take you half a minute longer than to do it wrong. It's just nonsense.
When we come back from break, we'll discuss the possibility of building a carpool culture in Fiji. Stay with us. At the beginning of the show, Mr. Moore, you spoke about how one of your observations, you saw 32 consecutive cars with only one occupant in them. So carpooling isn't a thing in Fiji. It's not in our culture. What do you think it takes for a country to become a carpool country? A country where carpooling is just normal, it's the thing.
I think first of all you need to have a mentality change. But also, if you're going to go down that road, which I don't necessarily object to, I think it's a good idea, you have to put the infrastructure in place to do it. I had a conversation with my team in the office the other day about Prince's Road, for example. What we want to do on Prince's Road is to create the third lane. So there's a third lane now, which is unofficial in the mornings and in the evenings. We want to formalise that by saying this is a peak hour lane. So in the mornings, coming into Suva, there'll be the normal lane plus the middle lane. And in the evenings going out of Suva, there'll be the normal lane plus the middle lane going out. And that's when you can start thinking about carpooling, because what you can then say is that if you're going to come into the city in the morning and use the middle lane, you must have at least two people in your car. And then you get enforcement cameras to monitor that and photograph where there aren't two people. That does work. It works in other parts of the world. It could work in Fiji.
Now, that's something that would work in theory, but let's be honest. We happen to see this all the time. We drive cars. We happen to be passengers in cars. How often do you see this? I mean, it's all the time, peak hour. Everyone just wants to get from point A to point B as soon as possible. Even off-peak hours, in the middle of the night, if you're going out to work or if you're going somewhere, you still see people just driving anyhow. So probably maybe a suggestion is if you were to cut out the number of cars that would be using those areas during peak hours, you could probably start tolling them like you do in overseas countries. Is that feasible for Fiji?
I mean, what we're headed to with that is congestion charging, effectively, where if you want to enter the CBD of any part of any urban centre, you have to pay a few dollars to get in there. Yeah, it works in many parts of the country, in many parts of the world, sorry. I remember personally experiencing it in London when I worked in London, because there's congestion charging. I had to use my car as part of my job, and I was covering infrastructure works throughout the city, so I had an exemption to congestion charging because it was a necessary use vehicle. And it was amazing driving through the centre of London in the mornings in peak hour because it was empty. And congestion charging works. But I think the only reason why congestion charge worked in London was because it was very expensive to get into the city. And I think it might be cost prohibitive because there has to be a balance between what is cost prohibitive and what is acceptable. In Fiji, I think you may end up being cost prohibitive if you try and do that. It's worth thinking about. But I think you do have to incentivise people to use this carpooling idea. First of all, if somebody in a single driver in a car entered a carpool lane, they get fined. But the simplest way of getting a carpool or a public transport mentality is to incentivise people that if they use a park and ride bus, then the parking is free, and the bus costs no more than the cost of petrol they would use to get into the city. So you can do the calculations to make it cost advantageous to the people to park the car and use the bus. Going down the road of tolling, I don't think will work in Fiji. It would just over-congest the untolled roads.
Since we're discussing possible ways of reducing traffic in urban areas, one of the most obvious ones, commonly used ones, is just improving public transportation. So many countries, even around the world, have been investing millions and millions of dollars in their transport industries. Fiji as well to some extent. What would you say about the way that people in Fiji utilize public transport? Just personal observation.
I don't believe that we have enough, frankly. And I don't believe we have enough public transport that would attract people working in the city, for example. If you're a lawyer coming in from Nikasi and you're wearing a suit, you want to be in a nice air-conditioned bus coming in. I'm not quite sure that exists to the extent it needs to right now. But I think the buses serve a vital service here. And I'm a big fan of the buses in Fiji because they help me keep my roads in good condition.
While we're on the issue of buses, we still have buses that are way past their shelf date. I mean, they should be put away and, decommissioned, but they're still on the road, and they usually are the main culprits of congestion. We see them stopping not at designated bus stops and bus stands. They just stop anywhere around the along the road. And people who use the buses are also guilty of just pulling on the bell, making the driver stop. Same thing applies to taxis. You see that happening with minivans as well. That causes congestion as well. So what can the FRA do to stop that?
I don't want to dodge that question, but it's not an FRA mission, it's an LTA mission. The enforcement of those things is LTA. Well, what we have to do for our part is provide the actual facility for them to stop where they should stop, and we will do that. But I mean, it's not just the buses. I mean, I came back from Nandi yesterday, going through the hills around Talanua, and there were lorries there that were 3K up the hill. They were crawling at 3 or 4 kilometres an hour up the hill. Now, and it wasn't even loaded; it was an empty quarry truck. Now, if it takes that slowly to navigate the hill, it shouldn't be on the road. And I think we need to have more checks on vehicles like that, definitely.
So would you suggest having better public transport facilities would allow people to, or would encourage people to use more of them?
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I think the bus services in Fiji provide a massively beneficial role and a vital role, and we're fully in support of what they're trying to do. Wherever we can sort out access, we'll do that. But I think you've got to align the use of the facility to the people using it. I think there's a disconnect there right now, particularly coming into the urban centres. But let's not rule out other ideas as well. I mean, I remember speaking to Mr. Gounder at Gounder Shipping recently about ferry services. I know he does ferry services out to Lamavitian, but I had a conversation with him about a ferry service from Nassau to Suva. Fantastic idea. Inside the reef, safe, fast. And why limit to that? Why not do Lamy to Suva? Yeah. Put the parking facility in Lamy and Nassau and put people on a boat. Bring them into the centre of Suva. It's a fantastic idea.
The final segment right after the break.
So, Mr. Moore, we thought we'd look at traffic lights. Of course, this is a major concern around the country in all areas. You happen to have new traffic lights that have been put into place, which are working, but we still have an existing network of old lights that need repair, that need maintenance, and some of them have gotten to the point where people just don't have any faith in it anymore. We had a few instances where our own drivers from FBC noticed that the lights would change very randomly, and of course the FRA did give an explanation on that. Talk to us about how much it's going to cost to completely get rid of faulty traffic lights and to install new ones, or to repair them at least.
Yeah, I mean, you can't actually repair them anymore because the parts don't exist and they're so old they're beyond recovery, I'm afraid. So we're in a phase now of replacement. We're about to award a contract, actually, probably around about September will be the award, for changing out around 35 different sets of traffic signals. Hard to say what the cost of that will be because it'll be measured on the actual physical work carried out. But general rule of thumb, the cost of changing out one set of traffic lights depends upon the complexity. A simple set for maybe a T-junction, you're looking at maybe $80,000 to $100,000. If you want a very complex one, which involves multiple directions and long distances between lights, anything up to 250,000 for one set. So over the next 12 months, starting in September, over that following 12 months, we'll be looking to change out pretty much, I'd like to think, most of the old systems in that 12-month period.
And the FRA also spoke about the fact that a lot of the traffic lights have to be manually controlled, and you're looking to change that.
Yeah. The automatic control of the traffic lights will run alongside the ITS we talked about earlier. So what we can do is bring in a computer system that can start configuring the flow of traffic. I was in Nandi yesterday, I drove down Martintar, and I noticed as I was driving down there that the sequence wasn't quite right. You can tell as you drive through that there's 4 sets of lights there. One set of the lights was not sequenced properly, so we can manually go and adjust that now. When we bring in this computer system, it'll be automatic. It'll tell you exactly how much to delay the green on that signal to make sure it's a continual flow through. That's probably going to be coming in the next 12 months as well.
What about upcoming projects for the FRA, say for example in the next week or the next 2 weeks or so?
There's a few. There's that traffic signal project. We've just awarded 2 contracts for new footpaths in the Western Central Division, and there's an ongoing contract which just started a while ago in the north for footpaths. And we've got several rural roads about to start as well.
In fact, while we're on this, there's been a lot of criticism about the fact that the recent developments with the FRA seem to be very centered around the Suva area. So I'm guessing you have a longer-term plan to deal with other cities in Fiji?
Yeah, we have an 8-year program right now. And then after, maybe it's the wrong thing to do, but this is the best thing for us right now, is that we tend to use Suva as a bit of an experimental ground for various things. So things that we do here, we take out to Lautoka and Nandi. So yeah, over the next 12 to 24 months, we'll be doing major works in Lautoka. The traffic system in Lautoka needs serious attention, so we're focusing on some transportation studies there, do some traffic counts, and think of some alternatives for Lautoka. We're about to start some work in Lambasa in advance of the Lambasa bypass project we want to deliver in a few years' time to make the traffic flow through Lambasa itself improved. Nandi's an ongoing project right now. There is a perception that it's all Suva-centric. It isn't deliberately Suva-centric. There are some projects in Suva that have been on the books for the last 4 or 5 years. And one of the reasons is because, frankly, the roads in Suva are more deteriorated than any other roads in the country. The harshest weather is here, the most traffic is here, the heaviest use is here, and the oldest roads are here. So that may be one of the reasons why there's a perception of being Suva-centric. It isn't actually a planned mission.
So as we head into what we generally call the wet season in Fiji, do you see
Well,
this
not yet,
being
please.
do you see this being a hindrance to FRA's upcoming projects and works?
Yeah, wet weather's always a problem for us. We just have to accommodate it. I mean, we've put in rules in place now where, for example, when we issue a crossings contract, we'll time the award of the contract to make sure that the bulk of the construction work is carried out in the dry season. We're trying to take pragmatic solutions like that. Same with rural roads. I mean, we could award a rural road contract now, and the contractor will spend 2 or 3 months mobilising, and then he'll sit there doing nothing because it's the rainy season. He wants to start in the dry season. So rather than waste time like that, we're trying to orientate our award of contracts to suit that period of time. And it is a serious issue when it comes to like crossings and rural roads. Less serious when it comes to the sealed roads, although it does have an effect if we haven't got the seal finished yet. But we are considering those things, yeah.
And the very last item on our agenda today, before we wrap up the show, we spoke a bit about this earlier on in the segments, parking complexes. So a lot of people have started, to complain about that, especially given the clearway systems being implemented and people not being allowed to park where they usually would, especially in the urban areas. So what's the possibility of having parking complexes in our urban areas? And I understand that some cities in other countries, they require by law that new buildings have a dedicated percentage of the property reserved for parking. I understand Fiji doesn't have such requirements, but how important do you think it is for us to have or start investing in parking complexes?
It's pretty critical, really. On the point of developments having to have a certain amount of parking under legal requirement, it does exist in Fiji. The problem is that the legal requirement is too small. We've written several times to the ministries on this, saying that it's not conducive to the scale of development. So a lot of these new buildings going up will have underutilisation of parking, undersupply of parking, which causes massive problems for us. There is a desperate need for parking. In a discussion last week, or so 2 weeks ago, with Nandi Town Council, we raised the issue of parking as part of the solution to the complaints around Nandi, and they were saying they were considering a multi-storey car park on the edge of the Nandi CBD, and next to the bus station, I think it was. And that should be everywhere. There are parking spaces in Suva that could be easily converted to multi-storey. It's just having the funding and the will to do that.
Mr. Moore, thank you so much for joining us today. We've managed to discuss a whole range of issues, clarify so many things, and we hope that this has been beneficial to those of our viewers watching. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Good evening.